all along. Now, with the current audience, you all know me. I'm passionate about Google. I love all things Google, and I have a passing knowledge of the admin panel. And I understood that updates was there's so many, aren't they? They all come charging in. It's easy to miss them. So I thought it's important for us to offer this as an option for people to come along to get the updates. These will be the updates that came in September. All the October ones, which you might have received this morning, will be at the end of the October, in early November, because it just seemed the easiest way to do it, to make sure I've got enough to present on. As is always the case, if I get very, very technical questions, I'm going to have to defer to someone else who knows more. But I suspect between James, who's my backup, when you all ask technical questions, and Peter and David, you'll probably work it out between the three of you. And I do have a YouTube question at the end that someone sent in this morning from one of the customers that Chris was talking to, that I'm hoping we can resolve. I think I've sorted it, but we'll do that at the end if that's okay. So these are the updates for September. Just a little bit about the layout of the slide deck. All the links in all the update emails that I have received in September are just copied straight into the first slide, and then October, when in the 2nd of November, when we do the next one, you'll get another slide of the October updates all in one place, and each of those links will take you to the Google Workspace update blog. So if you do need to read about them before you make a decision, then they'll all be there for you to get to. So that's the first slide. And then the subsequent slides, I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about each of them in turn. First one, and I know I've certainly been on that feedback and requested this because I thought this was really quite important, about being able to use move folders in shared drives. I think this is a big one, because actually the shared drives, people go charging into shared drives in schools without a clear plan sometimes, I think, and they are complicated. And if you don't get the permission levels carefully sorted, and you don't put things in there that don't need to be accessed by so many people so often, then you can get yourself in quite a pickle. And we have lots of conversations with our schools who say, but I can't get that out. I can't now add that document to my Google Classroom as an assignment. I'm saying, yeah, it's because you haven't got permissions to take stuff out of the shared drive. And so it does come with a kind of caveat, I think, the shared drives. So this one I think is quite good. QR code will take you to the form, but I'll share this slide deck with you afterwards if you want to be involved in that beta. This functionality is not there yet. They're in beta. They're looking for people to join the beta program. So if you haven't already done it, I think that's a good one to do. And the other thing about beta programs, if you've not been involved in any, it's worth just saying that actually they are looking for feedback during the beta program, and you're giving feedback from a much smaller group of people. So your feedback gets heard that bit louder. Once a function is fully in place in Google Workspace, you send feedback and there's billions of people using it and only 10 people send feedback. It won't have the impact. But if you're in the beta program, the impact is likely to be greater because you are as part of a smaller group. So it's definitely worth being involved if this is something you particularly want to see right. Not for them to make too many mistakes about the way that it works and the way that it's set up and where the permissions should be in this example. So hopefully you've been able to either take the QR code or you'll wait for the link when the document's shared with you later. So next piece of functionality is about making files types available offline. This has been available for quite some time now. The number of files is extended according to the blog update that they posted, so it can be many more different files, but this has always been available. You'll notice in the little GIF on the slide that it's showing you in files, the Files app inside a Chromebook, and that's the difference. That sliding button now is available. So if you just downloaded a document because you've collected it from a website because you think it'll be useful, and you've dragged it across into your drive inside the File Explorer window, you can then also make that available offline at the same time. You don't need to go to your drive and use the offline button, which is already there. So it's multiple routes to the same thing. So that's kind of quite nice that that's arriving soon. And that's on Chromebooks. That button will be there. This has sort of happened already. And now we're on this slide. I just want to mention that you've probably got a window of this when you've been on Google events. In the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, you'll see which type of accounts these things affect. This is across all things. If it just says education fundamentals, that's the free version, of course. It means that one and all the paid versions, all the enterprise licenses. If it's just to enterprise licenses, I will specify in the slides so that you know. And I'm seeing this happen. If you go to my chat inside Gmail, then when you click the rooms, because it does still say rooms, and click the plus sign, it now asks you to make a new space, but it still says rooms. Whereas on my mobile app, it now says spaces throughout. So I think they haven't quite got the labeling fully pushed out to everyone. So that's either here or will be here in the next couple of days for you. And the spaces bit seems to be there on most accounts. And that's right across. One thing I want to say in this is, actually, I don't know whether you do or not, I'm finding more and more I'm using the chat function inside my Gmail. You know, let me just stop sharing that so I can share this slide deck, because it might be something you haven't seen. I'll share everything so I can move around a little bit easier. I'm finding more and more I'm using the functionality here to expand and collapse my chat and my rooms, so I stay inside my mail rather than going to the separate chat window. I use both, but I'm finding more and more I'm not traveling anywhere else. And so if you haven't got it turned on here, I think you might well find that there's a a few seconds of time saving to be had from people. So if you haven't had it on, it might be worth thinking about it, because it does save you time, I think, here. So if it's not turned on your domain, have a little think about that. Okay, so this one is for enterprise licenses, Education Standard and Education Plus, and the option inside the admin panel to end meetings for all. And I think I was thinking about this when it first came out. If you're aware there's a problem in a meeting and you're at your admin panel, to be able to go in there, find that particular meeting and close it to prevent any further damage or harm to anyone happening, that's great. I can't think that that's a scenario that would happen a huge amount of time. So whilst it's useful to have, I think that's great. To go and end old meetings that are being used inappropriate, I think might be quite useful. Someone that's left a link that's still active. Although I think it's either 90 or 100 days. If a meet link is not used, it's one of those two periods. So it's 3 or 4 months, I think. Then it just gets turned off anyway. So it might be that you wouldn't match those. But the last step, I think, is the big one, that you can actually create a rule that says if someone is in a meet and reports a concern, then you can have that meet automatically closed. That's pretty useful. I think there's a caveat, isn't there? If the student discovers that and reports abuse, then the classroom gets closed down. That might be a bit of an issue. But I suspect that's something that they wouldn't know, so it would be likely to happen relatively infrequently. But that seems to be a really useful little thing. But it means you've then got to think about your rule in conjunction with that abuse report from a meet. So that can be quite a useful thing to do. And again, that's Education Plus and Education Standard. Again, I was talking with James about this earlier. This is quite useful to have, that you can set the default state for quick access for host management in Google Meet and admin. It's on by default. So the quick access is limited by default. So unless you've actively got a reason to change it, then I think you can leave it as it is. There's nothing to do. It is there. It's right across the board for all license types. But just to be aware that there is now the option to set that. And if some glitch happens that you suddenly find it's not set to the level that you want, then it might be that some updates affected it that Google wasn't aware of. So you know that it's there, so you can go and change it should you want to. But I think it's a relatively simple tool, because you just want it on by default on you. Because then the teacher can decide, the host, I suppose, can decide how they manage those access settings, meeting by meeting.
On that one, Paul, it's interesting to point out that on business workspace accounts, it's turned off by default. It's only education that have it turned on by default.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that, James. Yeah, okay. So preventing users from blocking people in trusted domains. So particularly, I'm thinking about for you, Dave, with a multi-academy trust where you'll have all your domains whitelisted from domain to domain, so the schools could collaborate should they choose to. You've got settings inside there, and again, the link's there for you to go and discover it, to prevent someone, again, deliberately blocking someone should they want to, which is kind of quite a handy little tool. because it means that those lines of communication remain open and they can't block them, even though they might choose to want to, for whatever reason. This is Education Standard Education Plus, and you're starting to get recommendations about what your actions might be in the Alert Center, which again seems to me really, really useful. Again, you two particularly might be in a situation where you think you're so familiar with this that you might not need those, but I think it's still a really useful tool. Maybe you feel you do, but certainly people new to the admin panel and new to enterprise licenses might be really pleased that, you know, here's the report, here's what's happened, yeah, here's what we recommend as an action to keep your environment safe and secure. So that seems to me a really clever next step for people to be able to do that. And I think it's the case that, you know, fully understanding all of these potential alerts might not be, you know, front and center of your kind of day-to-day working anyway. So to have that recommendation, I think, is really useful, isn't it? It just starts to make you think about, so what is the best next step here? And the option, as you can see in the red box, to delete it instantly. If you've read the information, the report tells me this, okay, I understand that, I would delete that, that's right. So you haven't got to make any additional steps. It's a quick process to read the report, understand it, and make that decision to do the action that's required. So I think that's quite a handy little tool. Makes your working day that little bit quicker, doesn't it? That any reports you get can be dealt with that little bit quicker. So that's a nice little additional tool. So this one is about being able to present from inside slides, docs, etc., straight to a editor. And remember that sometime soon, if I chose to present direct from this slide deck, which I did at the first, I went in and changed it, then you were also going to start to get the video feeds inside the Google slide deck. So you won't need to keep, you'll still see the people on your Meet. It's not here yet, but that's going to arrive soon. But to take that away from people so that you can't share from inside a slide deck into a Meet is an interesting option to allow them to do that. So that's coming, that's here now. Again, all of these are in a rollout, and if it's late in the month when the rollout started, so if the rollout didn't start till the 20th of September, it's normally a 15-day rollout, so it might not quite be with your domain yet, but if it was earlier in the month, it will be there by now. It normally takes 15 days for it all to appear on all accounts. This is right across the board for all, and it's just some metrics about the quality of the meets that you have in your across your domain, just to give you some sense of what kind of things were happening. Average CPU, you can see the things that I don't need to read all these out. Just gives you some information about what is and isn't happening, I think, which is kind of really, really useful for you to know, so you can actually start to make some decisions about how you might start to address that. You know, microphone audio level is quite an interesting one, isn't it? That if you haven't invested in, you know, half decent headsets for staff who are still delivering remotely for whatever reason, then it might just be worth, you know, a question of, you know, 20-30 pound can sometimes get you one that's more than adequate. Because once you've got a headset, the most modern microphones on headsets have got noise cancelling, so you know, and it's closer to your mouth, properly positioned, so you get a better sound level and things. So all those kinds of things are kind of help you make decisions about how you might support those events and what the issues are. So that's Meet Quality Tool and metrics for Meet Quality Tool, which is good. Backgrounds on Android, it's been on the iOS for a little while, and it's now there on Android devices as well. You can decide whether people can do that, and as well as being able to say yes, they can actually choose the backgrounds, you can set it that they can choose the backgrounds that Google supply, or in the little GIF that's on the screen, you can see in the bottom left of the video there's a little plus sign. That means that there's a second tick that's gone in there that says that they can add their own backgrounds. So this beautiful picture of me in front of my hydrangeas is because my boss has allowed me to add my own backgrounds. So just to be aware that it's like a two-step process. Yes, they can add backgrounds, but only the ones that are allowed, and two, they can allow their own backgrounds, so they can have images. My inclination would be that I'd probably allow staff to allow their own backgrounds, but probably wouldn't allow students, because you don't know what images you might get from some clown that decides they want to shock someone with an inappropriate image behind them. So they're really useful. If we are still going remote, and there's no guarantee that we won't go back to a remote pattern. I hope we don't, but you know, it might well be that we do continue. It might even be that you've decided to build some remote into the courses that you offer, and we are seeing that happen certainly at FE. So it might be that, Peter, you're making that decision. It allows people that you know, their first tool that they go to access their meets is their mobile. You want to offer them a level of privacy, so you don't get people to see their own houses. They might be embarrassed or not want you to see them for whatever reason. They might be in a hallway with a bathroom door behind them, like me. I always have to close my door. So it's a whole host of perfectly valid reasons why people might need to be able to add the backgrounds. But there's a question mark about should they add their own. That's the one that I would probably not allow for students, but would allow backgrounds that were preset. I think those. I don't think it's here yet, but someone mentioned that soon you'll be able to. Well, you'll be able to add your own backgrounds as options to choose. I'm sure I've read that, but I don't think it's here yet. I might have misremembered that completely. So maybe I'll cut that bit of the video. So those are all the updates that I have spotted this in September that have come out that should either be here or about to be here very, very shortly. The next one of these I'm going to do is on the 2nd of November. So I'll do all the October updates in the 2nd of November, and there's already about 5 have come out this week, I think, actually. So any questions or comments that have come out from those? Any observations? Any thoughts? There's a little note in there. Is that just the Twitter handles?
Yeah, Paul, thanks very much for running through the summary of the things. And as we mentioned in previous calls, there's always so many things coming out from Google sort of all the time. It's useful just to be able to pull together the summary in this way. So thanks for that. During the course of the presentation, I asked a couple of questions in the chat, which I know Dave and Pete sort of kindly sort of answered. But just a couple of things we didn't really touch on in the update: the age-related content changes, and I know that continues to cause some problems for some people with some applications. And the last conversation was around Blogger at one of the schools. Would anybody like to share their experiences of how they've managed the age-related change across their domain, which kicked in at the start of September?
Yeah, I mean, that actually, funnily enough, was yes. Dave, I'll come to you in a second. That was the question. I had a question this morning about issues about embedding YouTube videos in forms, whether that was related to the same thing. Dave, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we were well appraised of it by Google before it landed. What we didn't necessarily consider was some of the more edge Google applications that it would affect. So the Colab was one that we've had affected at one of our schools, SketchUp and Street Maps. So those 3 hadn't really been on our radar as potential issues. Ultimately, what we've ended up doing is basically bypassing that setting. We've just turned it on as everybody is over 18, and we are managing the security of each service individually as we used to do beforehand. Because this is an additional layer rather than replacement of security for any of the other tools. So that tends to be what we're doing for schools that are finding this, or at least on an OU basis sometimes, for schools that are finding this a major obstacle, because I think a lot of schools are finding it an obstacle. The biggest query we've had is from one school who insisted on having YouTube set up in an open fashion, whereas the majority of my schools are set it up so that it's either educational or approved videos only, and it's actually made them move to the same model as the rest of the trust. So that's really been our approach to it, was to turn it off.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So just to be clear, so the managed YouTube options where it's only approved videos by teachers, if the person's under 18, I presume they can still see all those.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, because we've had that on in sites across the trust anyway. Yeah, that didn't break when it landed, which is
Right,
what I would
okay.
judge my answer on there. I would have expected a hell of a lot more calls about that if that had been the case. But no, we're just finding that quite often now we're speaking to senior leaders and explaining why it's there, what was there beforehand, and what's still there, and making recommendations to approve OUs that are affected by it, just to allow them to function in a way that they're used to doing.
Yeah. So Peter, you kind of got your age range straddles that 18 plus barrier, doesn't it? So how have you approached the issue?
Yeah, so similar to Dave, I just set all of our existing users to over 18, and I've only set our new students this year to under 18, just because, you know, we didn't really have time to communicate this out to all of our existing students over the summer break, so I didn't want any issues there. Yeah, but I've not actually noticed. Yeah, it's gone very smoothly from my point of view. But it's a bit similar here. We've only got one college to manage, unlike Dave's got a whole load of schools with different requirements and things. We generally keep things a bit more open here, really, because, you know, we're preparing students for university, and we tend not to lock YouTube down too tightly, and along with other Google services.
So your current new year of intake is flagged as under 18, and everyone else is flagged as over 18.
That's right.
And as yet, no issues arisen from those new courses, those new intake. And have you got the approved video settings?
No. So we don't approve individual videos. YouTube, you know, safe search is forced on, that kind of stuff's on by default. But no, we don't handpick videos to approve, because it's, yeah, as I say, our students need a bit more freedom, don't they, to
absolutely,
to do research, and it's just not really feasible for a sixth form college to approve videos individually.
I think YouTube is such an intrinsic part of such a lot of teaching now. I think it's come as quite a shock those that have been made aware that it's not even a core service. I don't think people even knew. You know, they think, how can it not be? You know, it's just such an amazing resource, isn't it? So yeah, it's about making it manageable, isn't it? So the question that I had this morning, and we kind of touched it slightly, but I want to ask it again just to get a clearer answer. The schooling question was having issues embedding videos into a Google form, and is that a YouTube video, of course? So is that the same issue, that 18 plus setting? Is that affecting what they can and can't do, that they've not done that bit, so that everyone's gone to 18 plus?
Was it the students trying to embed the video in the form, or the teachers trying to embed the video in the form, Paul? I had the question this morning. I don't actually know which one it was. I didn't ask that question, actually. It literally came in about half an hour ago from a colleague, a customer that Chris was talking to. So I've suggested that they need to look at the 18 plus settings as a starter, because that seemed to me the most obvious issue.
Yeah, embedding videos is something that's turned off for under 18, doesn't it? But as long as you're in the 18 plus OU, that should still work, as I understand it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd also ask them to check how they're embedding it, because when you try and embed a video into a form, you can either paste the URL in, or you can search for it within YouTube. And it may be that if they search within YouTube, then that would only surface videos that they do have access to, and may allow them to get around that. Obviously, it's a bit more long-winded, and it may not necessarily get them to the video that they're looking for. But those are the two settings that you've got when you're looking at embedding a video within forms. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Good. Thank you very much for that. Good. So the other question that came up was about the waiting room, and I went through all my updates, and I must have missed that one, so I apologize for that. Do you want to say a little bit about that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally only just landed on our domain. It's not on my other domains yet, but it's on our Barton Pebble domain. So essentially, this update enables it makes managing Google Meet from Classroom a bit simpler. So firstly, the Meet link now appears on the left-hand side in Classroom rather than the top header.
All right, okay.
The other thing it changes is if you create a Meet link for your class and the teacher isn't in the meeting, students get put into a waiting room before they can actually join. And then once the teacher joins, they can join. The other change it implements is students not on the class roster they have to request to join the Meet. They don't just have full access. They have to knock to enter. And there was one other change, wasn't there, for which it implements, which I can't remember now. There are 4 things.
I mean, there's a co-host, isn't there? He's in place.
Yeah,
Co-host,
co-host.
yes, that's it, co-host, yeah. Which, I wish we had it last year during remote learning. It's a year too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would have made such a big difference, because we're not doing that many meets now. We're doing some still for kind of extracurricular activities and certain groups which can't be timetabled, but yeah, most of our lessons are back in person now, so we're not really taking full advantage of these features.
Yeah. So have you tried a meeting with multiple co-hosts?
I've not tried that bit yet. No, I had a brief try for waiting room, but no, I've not had a go of that part yet.
It works out that you can have anyone. I assumed before it arrived that you could add anyone as a co-host. I'm sorry, anyone within your domain as a co-host, but it's actually anyone. So I could add Dave or Peter that aren't on our domain, and you could be a co-host in this meeting, which is quite nice because they often are limited by domain, aren't they? So that's actually very useful.
But the key feature on this one is that any class teacher automatically becomes a co-host. So that's going to it caused a problem for us before, where we have learning support assistants who might be paired with a student, and they'll also be added to the classes in the meets. And in some cases, they were getting the Meet host controls over the teacher, just because they're also a member of that class. So
there was
that solved big problems for us.
There was that terrible workaround, wasn't there? I think it was David introduced me to it when Meets first came out, where you had to hide the Meet and then refresh the Meet so the kids could no longer use the old Meet link. Yeah. And you clicked on the Meet link to join it as a teacher before you made it visible for the student. Blimey, every single time, because it wasn't working properly, was it? Because the host controls went to whoever arrived first in the first instance.
It just got really complicated to explain, like the very intricate rules on Meet and why things behave that way. And I'm expanding it again to staff, and thinking, well, it shouldn't be this hard to explain it. It's got to be easier, but at least it's got there now, isn't it? It's amazing how much just develops, isn't it?
Yeah,
I made a video to explain exactly that process to our staff, and then pretty much the only comments I got back were, "But why? Don't they know? We've been in lockdown for a year. Why is this news to them?" And you kind of say, like, it takes a little bit longer than 5 minutes to release some of these things, but it is a frustration that all these wonderful features are landing, as you say, 12 months, 18 months too late.
But only for us, there are still countries in lockdown, so there'll be countries around the world absolutely delighted that these have arrived now, because they're still struggling to deliver, valid Meet experiences. So, do you want to say something, Ian?
I was going to say yes. So Peter, when of course you get the winter storms and the beast from the east, and nobody can drive around Barton Peveril because of the 10-foot of snow, well, then of course everything will be fine.
But we are in the south, and we very rarely see any snow here, unfortunately.
You're not supposed to say that. Supposed to say,
sorry.
We're always doing our risk assessment for severe 1 in a million winters and whatever else. The other thing though on the co-host, Paul, and I'm not quite sure whether I picked this up. In one of the previous meetings, of course, you kindly made me a co-host of a virtual staff room, and then I had to leave, and because as a co-host you'd set it so that everybody gets booted out when the co-host leaves, then I left and you all left at the same time, even though you were actually trying to continue with the meeting. So is that sort of generally available? Because if the teachers who are co-hosts sort of don't stay to the end, then accidentally, oh, I've got to go. Thanks, Peter, and we just immediately bring the meeting to a close, don't we?
Well, as the host, you get two options. I think that's what happened, is that you have leave the meeting or end the call. I think you chose end the call without realizing the implications of the two buttons you were presented with. If you'd chosen leave,
there were two buttons on the
there
screen.
were. That's just, so if you'd chosen leave the meeting, the call would have continued, and you would have just left. So yeah, but that's also very nice for a teacher, that they know that at the end they can just literally end the call and all the students get booted out. So that's a really good. I'm really delighted that's arrived.
Yeah,
because that's the other thing, having to wait for everyone to leave.
Yeah, maybe the two buttons, Paul, need to be sort of slightly separated.
Yeah,
that's what we categorise on our help desk as an RTFS error. Read the flipping screen.
I mean, the other thing that's arrived to meet, which I did in the end user updates, because there's no implications for the admin panel, is the mute all. That's also really useful. So, and literally, I used it day before last Friday it must have been, when I was in a meet with quite a large number of people. There was one person I could see. I'd done the can you all make sure that you're muted before we actually start. I actually made a joke about it. Oh no, just a minute. I know I've got a button that can do it, so I didn't have to highlight the person and say it's you, Ian, it's you, Owen, it's you, whatever. There was none of that embarrassment. I could just say, just to make life easier, I'm going to mute you all so that there's no feedback. And that I find really useful. That's an additional tool as well, which has been there for a while now, hasn't it?
Yeah. Can I go back to a couple of the previous sort of points that you raised, Paul? One was the use of offline sort of Google documents. One of the beauties of sort of everything sort of being online and not allowing people to work offline on resources or whatever else was the security aspect of control, that people couldn't take documents or sensitive material and put them onto USB sticks and lose them and all the rest of it. But what COVID's shown, of course, is not everybody has wonderful internet access, and even Chris has demonstrated that today. And for students working at home, sort of maybe they don't have large amounts of data on their phones or whatever else. So where do people feel sort of giving sort of offline access use versus being able to keep control of sort of sensitive materials? Where's the balance of that sort of conversation? Can anybody sort of give us some insights into that?
Okay, I'll talk. So from my perspective, this probably falls under the category of something that doesn't necessarily need to have a technical solution. This is a policy-driven solution, so we have a policy in not taking anything that would be personal or sensitive data offsite in any format that could be stolen or anything like that. Now, if staff are using Chromebooks, then they're encrypted by default. We have BitLocker on all our Windows devices. The Macs are encrypted as well. So it is a risk, but it's a manageable risk, I would say, because you still need to gain access to the device to be able to access the files as well. But it comes down to a far greater threat for me is somebody printing something out and taking it offsite, having it as available as an offline file on a device that is otherwise secure is less of a risk than somebody printing something and taking it offsite and leaving it lying around or having it lost or stolen. Yeah,
no, that's a great piece of feedback, Dave. So appreciate that. And Peter at the college.
Yeah, exactly the same really. So we've not used any Windows laptops for staff for years, precisely because of worried about those going missing with important files in there. So yeah, our staff only have Chromebooks, which, as Dave said, are encrypted. You got strong authentication, and well, as you know, they're the most secure devices you can get. Yeah, so we Chromebooks are only devices which go off site.
Yeah.
And that's only because I trust Chromebooks and I know they're going to be secure. I wouldn't trust a Windows laptop or someone's USB key or anything like that. I'm not sure how much offline files is really going to get used for us. Just because all of our staff and students have connections at home.
Yeah.
I guess maybe occasionally it might come to play if you're doing some work on a train, but it's gonna or something like that. But even our college buses all have Wi-Fi on board now, so students.
Can I ask Sammy? Sammy, have you got any thoughts about any of your students glad of the option to go offline?
Yeah, the majority of our students don't have access outside of college. We've supplied 2 Chromebooks to 2 students today for my class this evening. We now need to work on getting them a dongle so that they can join in. I teach fully online still, and bus Wi-Fi is beyond a joke, because at the college that I teach at is incredibly rural as well. So even if the bus could, it is literally in the middle of the Dales. So it's not going to pick up the signal anyway. So offline is still one of the most talked about things that we need to offer students. But like Dave said, it's a policy change as well. And it's a policy change in that all my students today have their work that's due for next week. So as and when they are on Wi-Fi, they can pick up their work and access their work. And it's a mind shift that teachers need to make as well.
Yeah, I guess it's in that planning and preparation cycle, Sammy, and on a global basis, because we have to remember that the Google operate sort of on a much larger scale around the world. There are still lots of the many of the hundreds of millions of teachers and students who don't have reliable sort of internet access, and if I remember rightly, a lot of people using tablets or phones or whatever else as their principal device, and therefore the ability to work offline sort of without consuming their data allowances, Peter, is a challenge for more people, but still lots of people here in the UK don't have that luxury of always on unlimited sort of internet access, but hopefully things will continue to improve.
Do you know when the offline mode for Google Classroom is coming? That's not been released yet, has it? Or
not that I'm
is it
aware
on
of.
its
No.
way?
Yeah, there was in the last updates in August sometime. They mentioned that's on its way, but I haven't seen any update announcements for it since. Yeah, and developing world, not third world now. We're no longer running the class system here. Sorry to be so.
Yorkshire's not developing, so I stick with third world.
I'm sensing there's a penile divide here. Is a penile the word?
It's very close. It borders very close, because I live at the very edge of North Yorkshire, but where I teach is absolutely all of North Yorkshire, and it touches where Dave is as a region, so close. It's literally crossing a line, and where Chris is as well. But it's once you get into that open rural space, we've got students that take 4 buses to get to college.
Oh wow!
And that's just the geographical shape of the landscape. But I've just put in the chat as well that America has a huge problem with digital access and the digital divide as well. And then there's a chapter by Sonia Livingston about social inequality in the UK. Huge passion project of mine, Digital Divide and Access for All.
So the question that then comes to my mind is that when they do get access, it's often through a mobile device rather than through a laptop or a Chromebook or any other device. So is that going to drive us to have to rethink the curriculum that we offer, or the delivery method of the curriculum? Because it might only be a relatively small percent, or my guess would be it's higher than we actually think, terms of their first device to go and access. Is there when's that redesign going to happen? I mean, are you doing it already, Sammy? Are you thinking I'm designing mobile first curricula?
Yeah, I design everything web-based, mobile friendly. And it doesn't go on my list of tools unless it has a web-based version. If it's app-driven, no. Because the time it takes to download the app and then the storage space on the device. So I go web-based all the time. My whole lessons happen in Google Forms, start to finish.
And I guess, Sammy, that's more to do with the age profile of the sort of students that you work with, as well as the fact that their principal access device tends to be more a mobile sort of phone than a traditional computer. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I've got 16 to 19s. And yeah, mobile wins hands down for them, but also we haven't bought them devices, so anything that they have will be an old device anyway, and then obviously we don't know what spec it's got to put anything on it as well. So if we go web-based, then we're making sure, and I say this, we're inclusive and accessible for all, and I include it when I do my accessibility speeches as well, because if it's not web-based, then it's not accessible.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that that philosophy and that strategy talks to is the fact that if you adopt a sort of web sort of first approach to the delivery of the content, where it can be, obviously there are occasions where some applications just aren't sort of available to a web sort of delivery, but there's always alternatives. In the majority of cases, then in terms of accessibility and equity of access, then those same applications used in school or college or university are equally available to the students when they go home, and they don't then have to say, oh, I need a copy of access of this software when I'm in school, but then when I'm at home, I've got to buy another copy of this to get access to it at home. So I think for those sort of schools and colleges and universities that have gone down that web first approach, their students and staff just benefit because they have the whole sort of learning environment available to them wherever they happen to be. So it's an interesting question. I mean, are there still applications, Pete, Dave, Paul, James, that you know still only run in on an on-premise sort of basis, and are you constantly looking for ways of moving those to the cloud?
Yeah, there's plenty. I mean, for us, so Adobe Creative Cloud is a big one.
Yeah,
we do have user-based licenses now, so our students can get a license to use it at college or at home, but I still need a device capable of doing that. And Adobe, you know, apart from Adobe Spark and a few other tools, they're not too interested in embracing the open web, are they? It's still very much about having a Windows or Mac device if you want to do Adobe. Then we've got other software like things like Logic and Sibelius. You know, Flat.io is a good alternative to Sibelius online, but my music teachers here tell me it's not quite as good and they really want to use Sibelius. So again, it makes it a bit harder for the students if I don't have a good enough device at home, but we at least I can run the Sibelius license from home. But yeah, there's plenty of other examples of software which is used in our more kind of specialist subjects. So things either in art and design, media, computer science, engineering, those kind of courses are more challenging when it comes to going fully web-based. But for other subjects, you know, if you're just studying English or humanities or maths or anything like that, those courses are pretty much all web-based now. And yeah, so
no, that's good.
we're getting there.
Dave, you were saying the 2D design is a challenge, and no web-based things. I'm sure I've seen some examples, but I guess change in those areas takes time.
Similar to what Peter was saying as well, there are alternatives, but nothing that works in the same way. And I think a lot of, there is an element of teachers not wanting to change and to invest the time in finding an alternative sometimes. But also there's an element of it ain't broke, so why do we need to fix it? A lot of the things with 2D design is down to its integration with laser cutters and so on and so forth that are local anyway. And I think the developers say, well, why do we need a cloud base? Why do we want to build in a lot more issues for ourselves in getting the files then to the output devices?
Yeah.
So there is an element of that, but there's others, like I just popped in the chat there. You know, we've just upgraded the education version of Sage to the latest version, and when we asked them about a cloud-based service, oh yeah, we've got that. What they actually mean is a hosted service or something that you access through RDS. So there's big developers out there that really aren't engaging with that move to web first.
Yeah.
It will be interesting how many of those, if we sort of came back on a virtual staff room in 10 years' time, how many of those companies are still literally in existence because the addressable market for your product sort of increases sort of hundreds of times if your product can be accessed by the 2 billion people or whatever it is that are online, as opposed to the smaller number of people who happen to be running a Windows server at the time or whatever it is. So yeah, but if everything was there today, then there wouldn't be a challenge. We like a few challenges, don't we?
I think web alternatives are getting better, and I think what Dave said there is quite right. It's about that. Not seeing a real case for change, because what you've got isn't actually broken. And we all do that, don't we? My kids are forever moaning that my television is only 22 inches across, because I think the world's supposed to have huge, great big whole wall televisions. I think, well, I can see it.
Yeah, but
and it's about that notion that you're expected to change and move on. But it seems to me that, like you say, the web is something that is such a driving force now. And I'm aware that I think is it 3D tin that Roger Nixon uses for his CAD CAM stuff, and he loves. I think it's that. Is that a name that I've got that right? It's been a while since I spoke to him. It was either that or Tinkercad. I think he's talked to me about that, which are both CAD CAM programs that work. I'm a massive Flat user. I mean, Flat and Notefly are the two web-based music notation software, and I've taught up to A level, and I don't believe there's anything significant in Sibelius that I couldn't achieve in Flat.
I agree, but I'm not the expert.
Sounds like a challenge,
and what you often get, what you often get is people will often say, well, it's about industry standard, and I'm saying, right, here's my take on industry standard. JPEG is an industry standard. Yeah, that joint photographic expert group got together and said, these are the standards for photographic files for us all to use, so we all have the same ones. The file edit view menus are common to almost every single program you're ever going to get. Yeah, MIDI behaves exactly the same in Flat as it does in Sibelius, as it does in Soundtrap. So that the file formats that get manipulated and changed, and the tools you can apply to them are the industry formats, not a specific piece of software, I don't think. And actually, when you say Sibelius, when you go into a sound studio and they'll have Ableton, they might not even have any music notation software in there at all. So who's industry standard? It's just it happened to corner the market, so it becomes de facto industry standard, and I don't think that it is at all. So I'm just going to kick my soapbox to the side there. Well, I mean, you'd expect me to say, of course you would, but I've done arrangements for bands using Flat, that are fully professionally notated. All the accents and marks and dynamics and timbres and DC and repeats are all in the right place. It just all works. So why would I go back to a several £100 license for one piece of software on one device, and I can only use it on that device? Same with Soundtrap and GarageBand and things. I've not kicked my soapbox out of the way, sorry. Same with Soundtrap and GarageBand. Soundtrap is accessible from anywhere. You don't have to go back to the same device to complete your work. And you can do it on your mobile. You can record, I want birdsong. You go out in your garden, record your birdsong, and you go back to the web base. There's a little thing called quick recordings, and your birdsong syncs and it's there ready for you to use. That's the mobile, access anywhere world that we live in now, isn't it? And that however beautiful the iPad might be, GarageBand is stuck on its device, isn't it? It's actually it's a beautiful modern device with an archaic notion of how the files should behave, isn't it? In a sense,
it absolutely is, Paul. So
I've got to kick my soapbox out of the way now.
Yes, off we go. So beyond that, are there any other things that we should be looking out for, or challenges, from a technical perspective that people are working on at this moment in time for this year, Dave? Yeah, no, that's always a driving force in many discussions. Pete, what are the big infrastructure projects that you've got ahead of you this year at the college?
Firstly, actually, just one thing you might be interested in working on. Dave might be interested in this. It might fill a gap for you. Is automatically auditing admin roles and privileges on Google Workspace. So I'm currently developing a add-on for Sheets to automatically kind of pull that data down into a sheet and notify if there are any changes to new admins getting added to roles, and if any privileges change to those. So you can do it in the admin console in a couple of different places, but if you've got a lot of roles to monitor, it can be a bit clunky doing it that way. And aim there to give a bit more oversight of that, because that's probably one of the most kind of crucial security things on Google Workspace, isn't it? If someone's in your admin role who shouldn't have been added there, or someone's modified permissions, and
I'm assuming that only you only have a very small number of super admins, Peter.
Yeah, small number of super admins, but then we've got other admin roles set up for doing things like accessing Google Vault, or the ability to manage some basic user settings for some people, or
but those delegated roles can't change their roles to add more functions to them, or create other people, upgrade other people to those delegated roles, can they?
Yeah, well, all it takes is one of the super admins to change something I either didn't think through or shouldn't have done, and it can escalate from there. But it depends how big your domain is and how complicated it is. So back to other projects I'm working on. So we're looking at refreshing our core network infrastructure this year or next year, just because that's getting a bit old and long in the tooth, and just looking at increasing our Wi-Fi. So I've got more access points in order since July, which I'm still waiting for. That's been the biggest challenge this year, I think. It's just getting stuff delivered on time.
I thought it was interesting. People were reporting today that the number of new cars that have been sold is all down because of a shortage of chips. And I'm thinking, no, actually, I'm sure the number of new cars has got nothing to do with the fact that there's a few less chips being manufactured in the Far East. More to do with the fact that actually nobody's got any money to go out and buy a new car, and you don't want to buy a new car only to find out in a couple of weeks' time that it's banned from the road because of whatever change in policy. So chips and new cars, probably not, but chips and Wi-Fi access points, I could believe that one. Peter and Dave, infrastructure projects for you for the rest of this year.
Revisiting our combination of filter and firewall, which Smoothwall managed to mess up. Hang on, we're recording, aren't we? Smoothwall had some difficulty with the first time round, so we'll be revisiting that. Some additional schools joining the trust, quite likely, so there'll be an element of standardization and bringing those on board.
Yeah.
In terms of other infrastructure projects, not massive amounts, although lots of interest at the moment on cybersecurity, hence the discussion we're having with Chris, and thanks for Peter's input on that around two-factor authentication devices. So I want to get that rolled out in the next few days, weeks, ideally. So yeah, that's kind of at the forefront of our mind at the moment.
No, that's great. Thanks for that. And you know, to finish off this whole area of continued sort of preparedness for the cyber sort of types of attacks, and Peter, the great work that you've already done, making sure that people you know, are using Chrome devices, they're using two-factor keys, you know, when it's done properly and explained properly, and the teachers are supported in the change, then actually that just becomes the new way of doing things. And then when other people have problems because of gaps in their security, you know, accidentally or whatever else, then the fact that your organizations continue to work sort of through the problems, I think is credit to you all. So let's keep on sharing the great work that everybody's doing. Okay, over to you, Paul, to finish.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks very much for coming along today. Tomorrow we've got Tim Freeney from Me Too, which is the excellent mental health app, which is going down a storm in schools. So if you want to know more about that, there are some updates on that he's going to be bringing to the party. So that would be great to hear about that. And we now know how important that was. We've always known, but COVID seems to have really brought it to the forefront, which is quite right. So that would be an excellent one to come along to. And as I said, I'll share the slide deck with you both directly after this meeting. And thank you very much for coming along, and I will see you all soon.